The waves were relentless that night. Ellie's flashlight beam shook as it landed on a figure half buried in the sand, his expensive suit torn and waterlogged, seawater dripping from his dark hair. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating his motionless face for just a second. For one terrifying moment, Ellie thought she was too late. Then she saw it, the faintest rise of his chest. He was still breathing. "Dad!" she screamed, her voice raw against the howling storm. "Over here, there's someone here." Her father came running through the rain, his old raincoat flapping behind him. Together, they knelt in the sand beside the stranger, checking for signs of life, fighting the wind and the waves. What Ellie didn't know in that moment was that pulling this stranger from the ocean would change everything. It would test her family in ways she couldn't imagine. It would expose secrets that had been buried for decades. And it would either save her broken family or pull them into a world of danger they never saw coming. This is the kind of story that reminds you why kindness matters. If you love emotional roller coasters about sacrifice, hidden billionaires, and love that defies every odd, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our stories. Let's dive in. The Atlantic was restless that night. Not just rain, it felt like the sky had split open, pouring everything it had onto the outer banks. Ellie Thornwood's boots pressed deep into the wet sand with every step, the wind pulling at her flashlight, trying to wrestle it free. She was supposed to be checking the chicken coop, making sure the new chicks were safe and sheltered. Instead, she saw it, a dark shape, tangled in the seaweed and storm debris at the tide line, not driftwood, a person. Her heart didn't skip, it plummeted. She ran, her voice swallowed whole by the howling wind. She dropped to her knees beside him. A man, face down, one arm pinned beneath a chunk of broken fiberglass. His clothes were torn, soaked through, clinging to him. He wasn't moving. "Dad, Dad!" Her voice came out ragged, shredded by the storm. "Over here, please!" She turned him over, a face. A young face, maybe late 30s, but weathered, like something carved from stone and salt water. His eyes were shut, lashes matted with sand, a dark gash near his temple, his lips pale as sea foam. She pressed her ear to his chest, a faint flutter, then silence. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her hands already moving on instinct. "Don't you dare give up on my beach." She tilted his head back, checked his airway. Clear, her mind, a storm of its own, suddenly echoed with her grandmother's voice, soft, certain, unhurried. "The breath is the first song, child. If the song stops, you must make it start again." She'd been 10 years old. She'd watched her grandmother bring a man back at a church picnic, calm as a Sunday morning. Ellie had never forgotten it. She gave 2 careful rescue breaths. His chest barely stirred. A cold spike of fear shot through her. "Come on, please." She positioned her hands over his sternum, locked her arms, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3, steady, firm, counting through gritted teeth. "Stay with me." 30 compressions, 2 breaths. His body lay still and heavy, indifferent to her effort. Footsteps hit the sand behind her. Her father, Elia's, his old raincoat flapping like a flag in defeat, his face drawn tight in the flashlight's glow. One look at the scene, his daughter's hands on a stranger's chest, the stillness, the urgency, and he understood. "Ellie, what?" "He's not breathing. Help me, now." Elias dropped to his knees without another word, though his own breath came in that familiar, worrying rasp, the sound his bad heart made when he pushed too hard. He pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. Searching, waiting. "There's something," he said quietly, "but it's not enough." His voice was measured, the voice of a man who had delivered bobbies and set broken bones for this small coastal town for 30 years. But his hands, Ellie noticed, trembled slightly. He hadn't done this in a long time. Not since the night they'd lost Dad. Her voice broke. "Please." They found a rhythm together, Ellie's strength and determination driving the compressions, Elia's providing steady, careful direction. The rain fell in curtains around them. The world shrank down to the cold sand under their knees, the sound of the storm, and the terrible quiet where a heartbeat should have been. On the 5th cycle, a sputter, a cough, a thin, struggling gasp. Ellie sat back on her heels, pressing a hand over her mouth. The man's eyes moved beneath his lids, then opened barely to thin slivers. They caught the light, but they focused on nothing, just a hollow, faraway stare like someone watching something only they could see. He was breathing. But he was there. "We need help," Elias said softly, already reaching for his phone. He looked at the screen, no signal. His jaw tightened. "The storm knocked out the tower." "We have to get him to the truck," Ellie said, her voice firm, pushing her fear down deep where it couldn't slow her down. "We can't wait for help that isn't coming." They moved him together, her father taking the shoulders, Ellie at his legs, dragging the unconscious man through the wet sand, his heels cutting 2 long furrows behind them. Every muscle in Ellie's body burned with the effort. Her boots slipped. She caught herself, kept moving. Elias made a sharp, strained sound and stopped, pressing one hand flat against his chest. "Dad, I'm fine." His voice was tight. "Keep going." They got him to the old Ford pickup at the edge of the access road, and with one final, exhausting push, managed to get him onto the back seat. Ellie climbed in after him, pulling the door shut against the howling wind. She grabbed the spare shirt from her bag and pressed it firmly against the gash on his temple, steady pressure. The way her grandmother had shown her on a kitchen table with a first aid book and a patience that never ran out. The truck's heater came on full blast. The man remained completely still, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature of the cab. "Drive slow," Ellie told her father, who had settled, breathing carefully, behind the wheel. Her tone left no room for negotiation. "Every bump matters right now." Elias drove like the road was made of glass. The wipers worked steadily against the rain, and the headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark. Inside, the only sounds were the storm and the engine and Ellie's quiet, one-sided conversation with a man who couldn't hear her. She found his hand in the dark and held it, 2 fingers pressed to his wrist. The pulse was there, faint, unsteady, like a candle in a draft, present but not committed. "You're okay," she said softly. "You're safe now. Just hold on. We've got you." She didn't know exactly why she kept talking. Maybe it was the memory of her mother moving through the barn on difficult nights, speaking gently to the animals, not because they understood the words, but because the voice itself was a kind of medicine. Warmth when the world had gone cold. Presence when everything else had stepped back. She kept talking all the way to the hospital. At the county hospital's emergency entrance, the automatic doors barely finished opening before the paramedics were moving. They took one look, the stillness, the makeshift pressure dressing, Ellie's expression, and shifted into a focused, efficient urgency that was both reassuring and terrifying to witness. "What happened?" one of them asked, already guiding the stretcher. "We found him on the beach during the storm," Ellie said, keeping pace. "He wasn't responsive when we reached him. We performed CPR maybe 4-5 minutes before he came back. His pulse has been weak and irregular since. I've had pressure on that head wound for about 20 minutes. The paramedic glanced at her with something like appreciation. "Good thinking. Do you know him? Any ID?" Ellie shook her head. "He's lucky you found him when you did," the paramedic said. Then the doors swung shut behind the stretcher and the hallway swallowed him up. Ellie stood at the threshold of the emergency room. The fluorescent lights felt impossibly bright after the darkness of the storm. She was soaked through, her boots leaving wet prints on the clean linoleum floor, her hands pressed together in front of her, habit or prayer, she wasn't sure which. Her father appeared beside her, moving stiffly but steadily. He put his arm around her shoulders without a word. A woman in a lanyard and a cardigan approached them, a social worker, by the look of her, with the particular kind of tired in her eyes that came from long shifts and impossible situations. "Are you the family who brought him in?" she asked gently. "We found him," Ellie said. "On the beach. We don't know him." The woman nodded slowly, her expression shifting, professional sympathy settling in around the edges. "Okay, we'll do everything we can. There's a process for unidentified patients. I'll walk you through what we'll need from your end. It's not complicated, just paperwork." Just paperwork. Ellie had learned over the past 4 years that paperwork was never just paperwork. Paperwork was bills. Bills were choices. Choices in their house were always impossible. Elias rested his hand on Ellie's shoulder, warm, heavy, familiar. "We'll figure it out," he said. His voice was steady. His eyes told a different story. The look they exchanged in that fluorescent hallway was the kind that didn't need words. They'd been having that conversation for years now, quietly, across kitchen tables and unpaid envelopes and nights, when the numbers simply didn't add up no matter how many times you ran them. Another weight, another mountain, another choice that wasn't really a choice at all. They drove home in silence. The storm had passed by the time the old truck turned down their road, leaving the world scrubbed clean and dripping and very, very quiet. The farmhouse sat at the edge of the property like it always did, modest, a little worn, every window dark except the porch light Ellie had left on out of habit. Inside, the familiar smells met her at the door. Old wood, dried herbs in bundles from the rafters. The faint, ever-present undertone of her father's medications on the kitchen counter. Smells she'd grown up with, smells she normally found comforting. Tonight they just felt small. Ellie changed out of her wet clothes slowly, her movements mechanical, hung her jacket, set her boots by the door, stood for a moment in front of the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at her was one she knew well and had complicated feelings about. Brown eyes, a little too tired for 22. A jaw set in that particular way her father called stubborn and her grandmother had called determined, depending on the day. Hair still damp, pulling loose from its braid. A girl who'd opened a letter 4 years ago and felt, for one brief and brilliant moment, like the future was a door swinging wide open. The girl who'd folded that same letter and put it in a drawer, very quietly, while her father coughed in the next room, and the power company's notice sat on the kitchen table like a small, patient threat. The girl who'd said, "I can go later," and understood, even as she said it, that later was a word that sometimes meant never. She turned off the bathroom light. Her father was in the kitchen, 2 mugs of chamomile tea steaming on the table, a ritual inherited from his own mother, a woman who'd believed that the right cup of tea at the right moment was not a small thing. His hands, Ellie noticed, had steadied. "He's going to make it," Elias said, pushing a mug toward her as she sat down. "You don't know that. I know the look of a man who isn't finished yet." He wrapped both hands around his own mug. He had it. Even out there on the sand, even in the worst of it, there was something still holding on. Ellie stared at the surface of her tea. "We can't hold on for him, Dad. We don't have the room." "We already did," Elias said simply. "We made the choice the moment you ran down that beach. That's already done. What comes next, we'll face that when it comes." She thought about the social worker's gentle, practiced expression, the word process. The forms waiting somewhere under fluorescent lights for 2 people who could barely keep their own lights on. She thought about her father's cardiology appointment next week, the one she'd been quietly dreading. The one she already knew, without saying it out loud, they were going to have to reschedule. Again, she drank her tea. Flashback, Thornwood farmhouse kitchen, 6 months earlier. The letter had sat in the middle of the kitchen table like a held breath. The University of North Carolina School of Medicine pre-medical program, full merit scholarship. Leo, 16 and wide-eyed, had read it twice, then looked up at her like she'd won something he couldn't quite fathom. "Ellie, full ride. Do you understand what this means? You have to go." Their father had been in the middle of a coughing fit, one of the deep, exhausting ones that came more frequently now. When it passed, he'd sat back against his chair, face flushed, one hand pressed flat to his chest. His voice, when it came, was careful. "The farm, my treatments, your brother's school fees, your mother's garden, it's barely producing. I can't manage all of it alone, Ellie. I don't know how." She picked up the letter, felt the weight of it, the specific, particular weight of something that could change everything. Then she'd folded it in half, opened the kitchen drawer. Set it inside, next to the power bill and the reminder from the pharmacy and the note from the bank she hadn't opened yet. "I'm not going," she'd said. Her voice had come out very calm. She'd been surprised by that. "Not right now, not while we're in this." Leo had argued loudly. Her father had protested quietly, which was worse. She stood at the kitchen counter with her back to both of them until the arguing stopped. She was a Thornwood. There was a version of stubbornness in her family that wasn't pride, it was bedrock. It didn't move because it had decided, a long time ago, what it was standing on top of. She stayed. The dream hadn't died loudly. It had just gotten a little quieter each month until she'd stopped being able to hear it over everything else. Back to present, Thornwood farmhouse, night. Phone rang at 10:30, sharp and sudden in the quiet house. Ellie was still at the kitchen table. She answered before the second ring. "Miss Thornwood, this is Dr. Kang calling from the county hospital. You brought in our John Doe earlier tonight." "Yes," she gripped the phone. "How is he?" "Stable for now. He's in the ICU. We're watching him closely. He's been through quite an ordeal and there are some things we're still monitoring internally. But he held on." A brief pause. "You got him here in time." "That matters. Will he be okay?" "He's fighting. That's the most honest thing I can tell you right now." Another pause, this one with a different weight behind it. "He has no identification on him. No wallet, nothing. We're listing him as a John Doe for now. The social work team will be reaching out about the financial side of things. I just wanted to call personally, because what you and your father did tonight was not a small thing." The line went quiet. Ellie set the phone down on the table. She sat with the word costs in the dark kitchen for a long time, the way you sit with something you already knew was coming but hoped, somehow, might pass you by. Her father appeared in the doorway in his robe. "Well," he said softly, "he's stable, I see you." She looked up. "They'll be in touch about the bills." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the kitchen, refilled the kettle, and set it on the burner. "We did the right thing," he said. "I know we did." Ellie's voice was tired but not broken. "That doesn't make the right thing free." He didn't argue. He just made the tea. She went to bed but lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sound of her father's breathing through the thin wall between their rooms, the slight labor in it, the careful rhythm he'd developed without knowing it. She thought about the man in the ICU, tried to build him from the pieces she had, the stillness of his face, the way he'd felt, the weight and the particular quality of his clothes under her hands in the truck cab. The fabric had caught her attention even then, even in the middle of everything, finely made, the kind of thing that didn't come from anywhere near Beaufort, North Carolina. Whatever his story was, it hadn't started small. She fell asleep, eventually, without meaning to. Morning came clean and bright, the way it always did after a hard storm, the world washed and glittering, the air smelling of salt and wet grass, as if the night before had been a story rather than a fact. Ellie ran the vegetable stand by the road, stacked the crates, made change, smiled at the regulars. Old Miss Henderson came by for her tomatoes, sharp-eyed as ever, handing over exact coins with the precision of a woman who had never once miscounted in her life. "Heard there was some excitement out your way last night," she said, not quite a question. "Just the storm keeping us on our toes," Ellie said pleasantly. "Everything's fine, Miss Henderson." The older woman studied her for a moment with the quiet, particular attention of someone who had been alive long enough to know when fine was doing heavy lifting. Then she took her tomatoes and went. Ellie watched her go. The lie sat in her chest like a stone. She was lifting a crate when she heard it. The soft, expensive purr of an engine that had no business being on this road. She looked up. A sleek black car was rolling slowly down their dirt lane, moving with the kind of unhurried, deliberate quiet that made something in her stomach tighten immediately. It stopped at their gate. Two men got out, dark suits, upright posture, eyes that moved across the property the way you scanned a room when you weren't there for conversation. Not police, not hospital, not anyone who was going to hand her a bill or a clipboard. Ellie set the crate down carefully. Her father came out of the barn, wiping his hands, and went very still when he saw them. She noticed, without drawing attention to it, the small, instinctive shift in his stance toward the door frame where he kept the old farm gun, the one that had spent its entire career discouraging raccoons and had never once been pointed at a person. The man in front stopped at the gate. He didn't reach for the latch. He waited. "Good morning," Elias called across the yard, his voice easy and carrying. "Something we can help you with? We're looking for someone." The man's voice was measured, professional. "A man, tall, dark hair. He may have been in some difficulty on the beach stretch near here during the storm last night." Ellie felt the pieces arrange themselves in her mind with cold, quiet precision. They know about last night, but the hospital wouldn't. "Can't say we saw anyone like that," Elias said. "Public beach, folks walk it all the time." The man's gaze moved from Elias to Ellie and back. "If you have seen him or if you know anything at all about his whereabouts, it would be very important for you to tell us. He matters to a great many people." "He matters to a great many people." The phrasing was careful. The meaning underneath it was less so. Ellie stepped forward, positioning herself between her father and the gate. "I'm not sure what you're looking for," she said, keeping her voice level, "but you're standing on private property. We've told you what we know. You're welcome to leave, or I can call the sheriff's office and we can have this conversation with more people present." The man held her gaze. He had the kind of face that was deliberately unreadable, trained, she thought, rather than natural. He was weighing her, measuring something she couldn't see the scale for. Then he gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledged something without admitting what. "Thank you for your time," he said. "Have a good morning." They returned to the car. The engine started. The car moved back down the lane and turned out of sight, leaving two clean tire lines in the dust and a silence so complete Ellie could hear the mockingbird in the oak tree. Elias let out a long, quiet breath. "Okay," he said. "They knew about the beach," Ellie said, her voice low. "They knew it was last night. They knew to come here." "They know he's alive," Elias said, "and they know we're the ones who found him." They looked at each other across the yard. "What have we gotten into?" Ellie asked. Her father walked toward her, crossed the gate, and put a steady hand on her shoulder. "We did a good thing," he said firmly. "We hold on to that, and we pay attention from here on." What would you do if strangers showed up asking questions about someone you just saved? Would you trust them or protect your own? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe so you're here for what comes next. That night, the farmhouse felt different. Smaller maybe, or just more exposed. Ellie checked the door locks, then checked them again. She stood at the kitchen window for a long time, watching the dark end of the property where the pond sat still and flat in the moonlight. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw a shape reflected in the water, dark, still, waiting. She blinked. Nothing, just the trees, she told herself, just the night. But she stayed at the window a little longer before she went to bed. The call came at 11. She was still awake. She answered on the first ring. "Hello in Thornwood," a woman's voice, crisp, composed, with an undercurrent of something urgent running just beneath the surface. "Speaking. My name is Anya Petrova. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Draven Blackwood." A brief pause. "The man you and your father pulled from the water on Tuesday night." The name landed strangely. Draven Blackwood. The kind of name that sounded invented, like something from the pages of one of those novels she kept face down on her nightstand and would never admit to reading. "How did you get this number?" Ellie asked carefully. "Mr. Blackwood provided your contact information before he lost consciousness. He was very specific about it." Anya's voice shifted, just slightly, a fraction of warmth breaking through the professional surface. "He's awake, Miss Thornwood. He's been asking for you and your father since early this morning." Ellie sat down slowly in the kitchen chair. "He's awake," she repeated, "critical but stable. He has a difficult road ahead of him, but he is very much here. And the first coherent thing he said when the medical team confirmed he was going to be all right was, and I'm quoting directly, 'Tell them I remember their hands, I remember their voices, get them here.'" The kitchen was very quiet. "A car will be at your property tomorrow morning at 9, Anya continued, her tone businesslike again now, like a door gently closing. "It will take you to the private airstrip. A plane will bring you to Miami, where Mr. Blackwood is receiving care from his personal medical team. He wants to thank you, properly." The line went silent. Then it disconnected. Ellie sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. Miami, private airstrip. A man named Draven Blackwood who'd washed up on their beach with no wallet and expensive clothes, and people in dark suits looking for him the next morning. She looked at her father's closed bedroom door. A man who rationed his own heart medication because the numbers didn't stretch far enough. A man who had knelt in a storm and used hands that were shaking to pull a stranger back from the edge of something permanent. She set the phone on the table. Outside, the Atlantic was quiet now, patient, and enormous and entirely indifferent to the small, significant things happening in the lit windows of a farmhouse at its edge. The storm was over. But Ellie Thornwood had grown up on this coast. She knew how the water worked. She knew that the calm after a storm wasn't an ending. It was the ocean deciding what to do next. If this story has you feeling things, hit the like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you know. And tell me in the comments, what do you think Draven Blackwood is going to say when he finally sees them? I want to read every single response. The phone felt like a live current in Ellie's hand. Draven Blackwood, private airstrip, Miami. "Dad," she turned from the kitchen counter. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Elias was already in the doorway, leaning against the frame in his robe, his face pale in the thin morning light filtering through the curtains. He'd heard every word. "A billionaire," he breathed, barely audible. "On our beach. He's awake, he's asking for us." Ellie's mind was moving in 10 directions at once. A plane. Miami. What if it's a trap? What if those men in the suits work for him? What if this is how powerful people deal with people who know too much? Elias pushed off the doorframe, slow, deliberate, the way he moved when he was thinking hard. He crossed to the old roll-top desk in the corner, the one that held his parents' faded medical journals and his bottle of heart pills. He didn't open it. He just rested one hand on the worn wood, his eyes distant. "He said he remembers our voices," Elias murmured, more to himself than to her. In all of that chaos, he held on to that. And that somehow decided it. The man wasn't a ghost, he wasn't a threat. He was a person who'd found something to hold on to in his worst moment, and what he'd held on to was them. You didn't turn your back on that, not if you were alone in Thornwood. "We'll go," she said. The decision settled in her chest like ballast, heavy but stabilizing. "Together." And we tell Leo first. Leo was the wild card. Always had been. 19 years old, lean and restless, with their father's calm eyes and Ellie's stubborn jaw, a combination that was either a gift or a liability depending on the day. He was fiercely loyal, protective to a fault, and his temper moved faster than a coastal squall. He'd want to come. He'd insist on it. And the last thing they needed in a world of private jets and penthouse security teams was Leo Thornwood deciding someone needed to be stood up to. They found him in the barn, locked in a battle of wills with Brutus the goat over a new harness. He dropped the rope the moment he saw their faces. "A billionaire," he echoed. "The guy from the beach, the one who was, targeted." "We think so," Ellie said, keeping her voice low. "His people are sending a car this morning," Elias added. Leo's eyes narrowed. "People, as in not regular people." "We don't know yet," Elias said. "But this man is alive because of us. He asked for us by name. We owe him at least a conversation." "We owe him nothing," Leo said, his voice sharpening. "We owe this family, we owe this farm. What if it's a setup? What if those men in the suits come back or worse ones show up in their place?" His gaze cut to Ellie. "You said it yourself, they were asking questions." "They were looking for him," she said, "not us." "Not yet." Leo ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. "I'm coming with you." "No." Ellie's tone was the kind that closed doors. "You stay here. You watch the farm. You make sure Dad's medications are locked up and accounted for. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call Sheriff Dale. You don't try to handle it yourself." She held his gaze, and underneath the words, they were having a different conversation entirely. The one they'd been having since their mother's funeral, the quiet promise two kids had made to each other standing in the rain outside a church. "We keep Dad safe, no matter what." "I'll call you every hour," she said. "I mean that." The argument that followed was short and tense and ended with Leo putting his fist into a hay bale hard enough to raise a cloud of dust. He didn't like it, but he understood it. His job was here. At 8:45, the black car turned down their dirt road. Different driver this time, a woman, hair pulled back severely, eyes that cataloged the property in a single sweep as the car rolled to a stop. She didn't get out. She lowered the window. "Miss Thornwood, Mr. Blackwood's team, we're ready when you are." Ellie's stomach was a tight knot. She'd put on her only good jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her father wore his best flannel, the one without the frayed cuffs, the one reserved for church and doctor's appointments and occasions that asked something of a person. They looked like what they were, farmers from the coast. The car's interior smelled of leather and quiet money. No music, no small talk. The driver navigated the coastal roads with smooth, unhurried precision. Ellie watched the familiar marshes and pine forests slide past the window, the landscape she'd grown up in, the one she knew by heart, and felt a strange, unsettling sense of leaving something behind. Not just a place, a version of herself. The airstrip was nothing like she'd imagined. No terminal, no crowds. Just a clean, immaculate hangar on a private lot near Morehead City, and a sleek silver jet waiting on the tarmac, stairs already down, a small stylized logo on the tail, a letter B woven through a double helix. A flight attendant met them at the bottom of the steps. "Good morning, Mr. Thornwood, Ms. Thornwood. Welcome aboard. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Flight time is approximately 45 minutes. The interior of the jet was all pale wood paneling, soft recessed lighting, and deep, cushioned seats. Empty except for them. Elias lowered himself into an armchair with a sigh that was equal parts exhaustion and quiet wonder. Ellie sat by the window, hands folded in her lap, and watched their stretch of coastline fall away beneath them as the ground disappeared. She'd spent her whole life with the ocean as a boundary, the edge of the world she knew. Now it was just the beginning of something she didn't. Miami hit differently. After the salt air and pine silence of Beaufort, the city was a full sensory event, glass and light and movement and heat, everything tall and gleaming and in a hurry. The car from the airstrip took them not to a hospital, but to a glass tower in the downtown core that rose into a cloudless sky like it had somewhere to be. They didn't enter through the main lobby. The driver took them to a private underground entrance, a keycard at a heavy, unmarked door, a fast and silent elevator that didn't stop once on the way up. When the doors opened, Ellie stepped out into a penthouse that stopped her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows on every wall. The city below, the bay beyond, and past that, the flat shimmer of the Atlantic, the same ocean that had deposited Draven Blackwood on their beach 3 nights ago. The space was open and flooded with light and breathtaking in the way that things are breathtaking when someone has had the resources to ensure nothing is accidental. But it was also, unmistakably, a medical space. A hospital bed along one wall, neatly made. Monitoring equipment, discreet but present. A medical cart. The faint, particular smell of a recovery room behind the luxury. A man sat in a wheelchair by the windows, looking out. He turned when they entered, and Ellie's breath caught a second time. This was not the unconscious figure from the beach. This was Draven Blackwood upright, present, and looking directly at her, tall, even-seated, lean and strong, his features sharp and composed, his skin a deep, rich brown, his hair cut close. A thin scar, still new, traced through his left eyebrow. He wore a simple dark shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and he looked like a man who had been seriously unwell recently and was refusing to let it show. But his eyes were the same ones she'd seen flutter open on the sand, unfocused and barely there. They were focused now, completely, and they were fixed on her. "You came," he said. His voice was deeper than she'd expected. Smooth and unhurried, but with a weight to it, the voice of someone who chose their words with precision and expected them to land. Anya Petrova appeared at his side from somewhere Ellie hadn't tracked, composed, efficient, a slight tension around her eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to conserve your strength." "I'm conserving everything," he said, not looking away from Ellie. "I'm simply looking at the two people who chose to give me a second chance when everyone else, including my own security team, had written me off as gone." Elias stepped forward with the quiet steadiness of a man who had learned, over many hard years, how to be calm when everything around him wasn't. "We're just glad you made it, sir." Draven's gaze moved to him. Something in it shifted a recognition. Respect, maybe. "You're the healer," he said. "The one who remembered the technique under pressure. The doctors told me it's the reason the outcome was what it was. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from a textbook." Elias gave a small, self-effacing shrug. "My mother, she was the real healer. I just held on to what she taught me. I wasn't sure I'd remember it correctly, honestly." "You remembered exactly correctly," Draven said. "It worked." A silence settled over the room, not uncomfortable, but full. The hum of the city 40 floors below. The soft, steady sound of the monitoring equipment. Ellie looked around at the medical equipment, the security presence, the jaw-dropping view, and felt the full distance between this world and hers in a way that was almost physical. "Why Miami?" she asked. The question came out more direct than she'd planned, but she didn't take it back. "Why not a hospital in North Carolina? Why all of this?" Draven's expression shifted. Not offended. Almost, she thought, relieved that she'd asked directly. "Because what happened to me wasn't an accident," he said. "The hospital in Beaufort is excellent, but it's not built to handle the aftermath of a deliberate attack or to protect someone who is still a target." The word, attack, settled over the room like a change in air pressure. "Someone tried to stop me," Draven continued, his voice even and measured. "They used the storm as cover. They wanted the research I've been developing, a potential treatment for a rare neurological condition that my company is close to completing. I survived. I ended up on your beach." He paused. "That's the short version." Elias' hand moved to his chest. "A treatment," he said softly. "For what condition?" Draven looked at him steadily. "Hereditary sporadic encephalopathy, HSE, it's rare. It progresses slowly and then quickly, and the medical community has had very little to offer for a very long time." A pause. "It's what your wife had, isn't it, Mr. Thornwood?" It wasn't a question. Elias went completely still. A single tear moved down the side of his face, quiet and unhurried. He nodded once without speaking. Ellie felt the floor shift under her feet. Draven looked from her father's grief to her face. "I know because I've spent the better part of a decade trying to understand this illness," he said. "My younger sister had it. She was 8 years old." He let that sit for a moment. "And I know because, while going through historical medical records looking for early documentation of the condition, I found references to a healer in a small coastal community in North Carolina, a woman practicing in the early 1900s who treated symptoms that match HSE with remarkable accuracy, using local herbs, using methods that weren't in any formal medical text." He looked at Ellie. "Her name was Matilda Thornwood." The room went very quiet. Ellie knew that name before she could form a conscious thought around it. She'd grown up with it, the faded photograph in their hallway, the stories her father told on long winter evenings, a woman with sure hands and a deep, calm knowledge of the land and the body. You know about her, Ellie said. It wasn't quite a question. Her documented methods kept my sister stable longer than any conventional treatment, Draven said, his voice quieter now. The records were partial, fragments referenced by a doctor who worked alongside her. I was on my way to meet a descendant of that doctor, to try to locate the original documentation, when my transport was forced down. He looked between them. The people who came to your farm the next morning, I don't believe they were only looking for me. I believe they've traced the same historical trail I have. I believe they think your family has Matilda's original notes. And I believe that's why they showed up at your gate. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a room. Ellie looked at her father. Her father looked at his hands. We don't have anything, Elias said. His voice was steady and certain. Matilda's journals were lost in a fire when my mother was a child. We have her stories. We have her name. That's all that survived. They won't believe that, Draven said quietly. The people looking for this are not operating in good faith. They're frightened, which makes them more dangerous, not less. They will assume you're concealing something. He held Ellie's gaze. Your farm is not a safe place for your family right now. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that. The words "not safe" and "your farm" in the same sentence did something to Ellie's chest that she couldn't entirely describe. 4 years of holding that place together. Her mother's garden. Her father's workbench. Leo's old drawings still stuck to the kitchen wall with tape that had yellowed at the corners. Before she could respond, a door opened and a man entered in a white coat, compact, precise, with kind eyes behind clean-lined glasses and the particular efficient calm of someone who is very good at their work. Mr. Blackwood. His tone was gently but firmly reproachful. You've been in this chair for 40 minutes longer than we discussed. Dr. Kang, Draven said, without apology. The doctor turned to Ellie and Elias with a small bow of acknowledgement. I'm Dr. Minjun Kang. I've been overseeing Mr. Blackwood's recovery. He glanced at Elias with professional attention. Mr. Thornwood, your breathing is a little shallow. How are you feeling? Elias waved a hand. Just a great deal to absorb. Dr. Kang was already reaching for his stethoscope. Let's have a listen while you absorb it. Ellie watched her father submit to the examination with the slightly embarrassed compliance of a man who always told other people to see doctors and resisted seeing them himself. Dr. Kang worked quietly and thoroughly, his questions brief and precise. While he worked, Draven wheeled himself closer to Ellie. You're thinking about your brother, he said. She looked at him sharply. How did you? Anya is thorough. A simple statement, no apology. She told me about Leo, about the scholarship, about what you chose to do instead. Ellie said nothing. You gave up a future you'd earned, Draven said, his voice low enough that it didn't carry. Without complaint. Without asking anything of anyone. That's not a small thing. He paused. I'm not in a position to give you back the time, but I can address what comes next if you'll allow it. Across the room, Dr. Kang straightened, a slight crease between his brows. Elias, he said carefully, your heart is working harder than it should be. The past few days have put strain on it that I'd like to address properly, not in a follow-up appointment 6 weeks from now. Here, now, with our full team. Elias looked stricken. Here, I couldn't possibly. It's taken care of, Draven said, not loudly, not with any kind of display, just a statement of fact. You saved my life. The very least this situation can offer you is access to the best cardiac care available. Dr. Kang is among the top cardiologists in the country, and he's also a researcher who has spent years trying to build a bridge between traditional healing knowledge and modern medicine. He looked at Elias. Your family's understanding of the body, the things passed down through Matilda's line, that's not folklore. That's a methodology we haven't fully decoded yet. I'd like to try. Ellie's head came up. He wasn't talking about charity. He was talking about recognition. A century of knowledge that the formal medical world had walked past without stopping, and he was saying it deserved a proper seat at the table. And Leo, she asked. There's a pre-medical scholarship available at UNC with his name on it, Draven said. Full support, a summer research placement in our biotech division if he wants it. The farm can be placed in a management trust. It won't run itself, but it won't be lost either. It was too much. The sheer volume of it, the sudden, overwhelming tide of things being offered and resolved and arranged, made her feel, paradoxically, like she was losing her footing. You can't just reorganize people's lives, she said, her voice catching slightly. We don't know you. This morning we were selling tomatoes by the road. I know. Draven didn't flinch from it. 2 days ago, a man who owed me nothing ran into a storm to save a stranger. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask what it would cost. He acted because it was right. He glanced at Elias with something that might have been reverence. I'm not reorganizing your life. I'm responding to the example your father set. If his moral logic is sound, and I believe it is, then mine has to match it. Ellie looked at her father. Elias was watching Draven with an expression she hadn't seen on his face in a long time. Not since before her mother got sick. The expression of a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just been offered the possibility of setting it down. The faint, careful light of hope. She was still searching for the right words when the penthouse's main door opened and Anya entered, her composure tight in a way that immediately changed the temperature of the room. Mr. Blackwood. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it, something urgent. Security has flagged 2 vehicles attempting to access the private garage. Unmarked. They're presenting credentials for a company called Langford Consulting. Something moved across Draven's face, recognition, and a cold, settled anger. How many? 3 in each vehicle. They're not presenting as corporate staff. Security assesses them as professionals. Draven's hand moved to the side of his wheelchair. A recessed panel slid back. He rested his fingers on a compact, secured firearm inside, didn't lift it, but didn't move his hand away either. Get the Thornwoods to the secure room, he said. His voice had changed completely. The careful, measured man was still there underneath, but the surface was something else now, the voice of someone who had not built what he'd built by being unprepared. Now, Anya. This way. Anya was already moving. Please, quickly. Dad. Ellie took her father's arm. Go, Draven said, his eyes already on the entrance. Please. They were guided swiftly down a corridor Ellie hadn't noticed, plain, functional, away from the glass and light of the main space, to a reinforced door. Anya entered a code. The door opened to a compact, windowless room. A cot, a water cooler, and a monitor showing 6 live feeds from cameras throughout the penthouse. Stay here until I or Mr. Blackwood come for you personally, Anya said. Her eyes went briefly to Elia's professional assessment, genuine concern underneath it. Don't open this door for anyone else. The door closed. The lock engaged with a sound like something final. Ellie and her father stood in the low light of the monitor's glow. On the screen, 6 camera feeds showed the penthouse from different angles. Draven was still by the windows, positioned where he could see the main entrance clearly. His posture was utterly still. His hand rested in his lap. He looked like a man who had been in difficult rooms before and had learned how to be the calmest thing in them. What's happening? Elias said softly. His breathing was careful. She could hear him managing it. People who don't want him to finish what he started, Ellie said. On the center feed, the main door came open, not with a key card. Forced, swift, deliberate. 3 figures in dark tactical gear entered in a tight, practiced formation, faces covered. They moved the way people move when they've done this before and are not interested in conversation. Draven raised both hands, slowly, palms out. Looking for me? His voice came through the room's audio feed, perfectly level. I'm right here. You've got every advantage. Tell me what you need. The lead figure moved toward him. The research, Blackwood, the HSE treatment, final synthesis, where is it? Completed and distributed, Draven said. Not a boast, just a fact delivered with quiet precision. 4 separate servers, 3 countries, 2 law firms as custodians. Whatever you came here to stop, it's already past you. The figure stopped. That hesitation was the opening. From the side corridor on the feed, silent, extremely fast, 2 members of Draven's security team moved in. What followed was brief and controlled. 3 trained professionals facing 2 who were faster, and it was over in seconds. No one was injured. The intruders were restrained, secured, and on the floor before the scene had time to fully develop. Draven lowered his hands. He looked up directly into the nearest camera, as if he knew exactly where Ellie and her father were sitting. It's clear, he said quietly. Let them out. The door opened 30 seconds later. Ellie stepped back into the penthouse on legs that weren't entirely steady. The room was calm now in the way that rooms are calm when something has just passed through them. Draven's security team moving with professional efficiency. Dr. Kang appearing from the medical area, already heading toward Draven with his stethoscope out, and an expression that strongly suggested he had several things to say. You are not supposed to be managing active situations, Dr. Kang said, his voice firm with the particular authority of a physician who was done being polite about it. I wasn't managing anything, Draven said. I was sitting in a chair. Your heart rate says otherwise. While Dr. Kang made his case and Draven deflected it, Anya appeared at Ellie's side. The men from your farm, she said quietly, nodding toward the restrained figures being escorted out by security. We believe they're connected. They were after the same thing, the historical documentation, Matilda Thornwood's original records. The records that don't exist, Ellie said. Yes, Anya's voice was flat, which is not a fact they're willing to accept. Elias had found an armchair and lowered himself into it, and Ellie could see in the set of his shoulders and the careful rhythm of his breathing that the morning had cost him. She moved toward him, crouching in front of the chair, her hand on his arm. I'm all right, he said before she could ask. Then, after a pause, he's a serious man. Yes, Ellie agreed. He meant what he said about your grandmother's work. She didn't answer that. From across the room, she heard the main door open again. She stood. Leo came through it like a force of weather, tense, wide-eyed, furious, flanked by two of Draven's staff who looked like they'd had an energetic 40 minutes getting him into a car. He scanned the room in a single sweep, and when he found Ellie and Elias, his face did the thing it always did when he'd been frightened. It went briefly soft, and then immediately hard again. What is happening? He said, not quite a question. They would not tell me anything. Just come with us, sir. Where are we? Who are these people? Is everyone? His eyes landed on the men being escorted out. His jaw tightened. What happened? Leo, Ellie crossed to him. Everyone is safe. I know it looks like a lot. It is a lot, Ellie. I know. She put a hand on his arm. It's a long story. I'll tell you everything, but we're okay. Draven had been wheeled to a position where he could see all three of them. He waited until Leo's attention found him before he spoke. Leo Thornwood, he said. I'm Draven Blackwood. I'm the reason your family was pulled into this, and I'm sorry for it. Leo stared at him. The anger on his face was doing complicated work, trying to find somewhere to go in a situation where the person responsible was sitting in a hospital wheelchair looking him directly in the eye and apologizing without any apparent calculation. Draven looked at all three of them. I've made enemies, he said. His voice was quiet and clear and carried without effort. That's the consequence of the work I've chosen to do. I accepted that cost for myself a long time ago. I did not have the right to pass it on to people who had nothing to do with my choices. And yet here you are. A breath. I can't undo the past few days, but I can make sure that from this point forward, what you're given is more than what you've lost. His gaze settled on Elias, on the careful breathing, the tired eyes, the hands of a man who had given everything he had to a stranger on a beach and was still sitting up straight because that was what Elias Thornwood did. Your family carried a piece of knowledge across 100 years, he said. Not in journals, in memory, in practice, in the way you move through the world. Matilda Thornwood's work deserves to be part of the record, not as a footnote, but as a foundation. Let me help build that. Then he looked at Ellie. The quality of his attention was different from anything he'd directed at the room before. Not softer, exactly, more direct. The way you look at something when you've decided to stop looking away from it. And you, he said. You didn't just give me air and a pulse on that beach. You talked to me, you stayed. A pause. I don't know if you remember what you said. She did, actually. Nonsense words. You're okay. You're safe. Hold on. You told me I was safe, he said. I hadn't heard that in a long time. Something moved briefly in his expression and then steadied. I'd like to offer you something proportional to what you gave me. Not a payment. A partnership. Your mind, your instincts, the things you understand about care and healing, they have a place in what we're building if you want it. The penthouse was quiet. Outside, Miami glittered in the afternoon light, all that distance below, a world Ellie had never been part of, humming along completely indifferent to the moment unfolding 40 floors above it. She looked at her father. He looked back at her with the expression of a man who had already decided and was waiting patiently for his daughter to find her way to the same place. She looked at Leo, whose anger had somewhere along the way converted itself into a stunned, wide-open attention. She looked at Draven Blackwood, who was still watching her with those direct, unhurried eyes and who, she was beginning to understand, was a man who did not look away from difficult things. The storm had come out of nowhere, washed a stranger onto her beach, upended every quiet, narrow certainty about what her life was going to be. She'd spent 4 years being the person who said not yet, who said later, who said it's fine, we'll manage. She was very tired of managing. She looked at Draven. Going to need to know a lot more, she said. About the research, about the people coming after it, about you. She held his gaze. All of it, not a version of it. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close. All of it, he agreed. And Leo gets to make his own choices, she said. You don't arrange his life, you give him the information and you let him decide. Agreed. And my father sees your cardiologist today with a full report that we keep a copy of. Already arranged. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the ocean caught the afternoon light and threw it back at the sky. Then we'll talk, she said. And Ellie Thornwood, who had spent 4 years holding a life together with both hands and no help, felt the first small, terrifying, necessary loosening of something she'd been gripping for a very long time. Would you have said yes? Could you trust someone whose world just tried to bring your family into a crossfire? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe so you're here when the real story of Matilda Thornwood's legacy finally comes to light. Because what's buried in that history is bigger than any of them know. The silence in the penthouse was the kind that follows something that can't be taken back. Leo's eyes moved in quick, sharp arcs, from the restrained figures being escorted out by security, to Draven's steady hand resting near the compartment in his wheelchair, to Ellie's face. Elias had sunk against the arm of the couch, one hand pressed flat to his chest, his breathing shallow and careful. What in the world is going on? Leo finally said, stepping in front of Ellie the way he'd been doing since he was 12 years old, instinctive, protective, completely impractical. Who were those people? Why is a billionaire CEO in a wheelchair with a firearm? And since when do we have people showing up at our farm asking dangerous questions? Leo, lower your voice, Ellie said. Her own voice wasn't entirely steady. She moved around him and went straight to her father. Dad, look at me, your heart. I'm fine, Elias said. The gray undertone of his face said otherwise. Dr. Kang was already there, blood pressure cuff in hand, his usual composed manner sharpened into focused urgency. Pulse is elevated, BP is climbing. He needs to sit down and stay down. He guided Elias firmly to the cushioned couch, his movements efficient and gentle at once. Stress is one of the worst things possible for his condition right now. I need him on a monitor immediately. Anya was already on the phone. Within 2 minutes, a small medical team had moved in quietly with a portable cardiac monitor, attaching leads, adjusting settings, checking readings. Ellie held her father's hand through all of it, her thumb moving in slow circles over his knuckles the way her mother used to do. Her mind was running in every direction at once. The people who'd come through that door. The offer Draven had made. The name Langford hanging in the air like smoke. Draven watched from across the room, his jaw tight. He'd seen this before, the specific expression of people who had been living their lives quietly and correctly, and had been pulled into a conflict that wasn't theirs. It never got easier to witness. He'd promised himself, a long time ago, that he would never be the kind of man who treated other people's safety as an acceptable cost of doing business. He wasn't sure he'd kept that promise well enough. Anya, he said, I want those individuals transported to a secure location for questioning. I want a full account of every instruction they were given, every communication, every financial trail, and connect me with our legal team and the FBI field office. What happened here tonight is not a business dispute. It's a serious criminal matter and needs to be treated as one. Anya nodded, already stepping away with her phone. The security team moved with quiet efficiency. The penthouse, which moments ago had felt overwhelmingly crowded, settled into a strange stillness, just the 6 of them now. Ellie and her father, Leo, still tense and watchful near the wall, Draven, Dr. Kang, Anya returning from the corner. Draven wheeled himself a little closer to Ellie. When he spoke, it was quietly, just for her. I'm sorry it came to this. I told you the people on the other side of this are serious, and I meant it. But what I said before still stands, every word of it. I'm not offering your family a transaction. I'm asking you to help finish something that started 100 years ago in your great-grandmother's hands. And I'm asking because you are exactly the right person to do it. He paused. All of you. Ellie looked at her father. His eyes were closed now, his breathing slower as Dr. Kang adjusted his medication. The monitor beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. He looked smaller than she was used to seeing him. Older. And underneath the tiredness and the gray, she could still see the man who had knelt in a storm and remembered exactly what to do. She looked at Leo. His fists were still at his sides, but his eyes, when they landed on their father, were soft in the way they always went soft when he was trying not to show how much he loved someone. She thought of the farm. The smell of it in the morning, damp earth and salt air, and the particular green of her mother's garden coming back a little more every spring. She thought of the letter in the drawer she hadn't opened in 4 years. She thought of sitting by her mother's side during the last months, holding her hand, not knowing what was happening in her body or how to stop it. Just staying. Because staying was all she had. She turned back to Draven. He was watching her with no performance in it, no sales pitch, no executive composure. Just a man who had nearly died on a beach 3 nights ago and was sitting in a borrowed wheelchair trying to figure out how to deserve the second chance he'd been given. "Okay," she said. He blinked. "Okay, I'll be your partner." She held up a hand before he could respond. "But on my terms, all of them. I'm listening. First, the Traditional and Community Health Initiative runs independently. I lead it. No board interference, no corporate rebranding of what my great-grandmother built. I decide how her methods are integrated with modern research." He nodded once. "Second, Leo gets his scholarship and he chooses where he works. If he wants Raleigh, he gets Raleigh. If he wants to intern in Beaufort, that's his choice. You don't steer him." "Agreed. Third, the farm stays in our family. We can hire a manager, we can accept help with my father's care, but no one turns that land into anything except what it is." "Done." She looked at him steadily. "And fourth, if I ever find out that anything you've told us today isn't true, I will use every resource available to me to make sure the truth comes out. I grew up on that coast. I know what plants can do." She let that sit for exactly 1 beat. "Don't test me." There was a silence, and then low, unguarded, completely genuine, Draven laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd heard from him. It changed his whole face. "Deal," he said and held out his hand. "Every single point, and I want to be clear, I have no intention of being anything other than honest with you. That's not who I want to be in this." She took his hand. His grip was warm and firm, and there were calluses she hadn't expected. For a moment the room fell away, the monitor, the security team somewhere beyond the hallway, the whole impossible, improbable architecture of the last 72 hours. And it was just a handshake between 2 people deciding to trust each other. "Wonderful," Leo said from across the room, his voice somewhere between exasperated and affectionate. "Now that the formal agreement portion of our evening is complete, could someone please explain to me why there were people in tactical gear in the living room? And who is checking on Brutus?" Ellie laughed. It surprised her, the genuine, helpless kind that releases something built up too long. She felt it move through her shoulders, loosening the knot that had been there since the storm. "I'll explain everything," she said. "But first we make sure Dad is stable, and we call the sheriff's office back home to check on the property." Anya's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound was ordinary. The look on Anya's face when she read the screen was not. She looked up at Draven. "Security intercepted a transmission from a prepaid device near the Thornwood property. 3 individuals approaching the farm from the tree line. They're looking for documentation, Matilda Thornwood's original notes. The instruction was to locate the material before a press conference tomorrow." A pause. "And to leave no trace behind if they couldn't find it." The room went very cold. Draven's expression didn't shift dramatically. It just went still in a way that was somehow more alarming than anger. His hand moved to the compartment in his wheelchair. "Get the security team to that property now," he said. "Non-confrontational approach unless there is an immediate and direct threat. I want everyone on that farm safe, and I want those individuals secured for questioning. This ends tonight." Ellie's mind had already jumped ahead of the words. The farm. "Leo is," she turned. Leo was right there, 3 feet away, already on his feet, already looking at the door. He'd picked up a heavy brass lamp from the side table. He set it back down when he caught her expression. "I know that property better than any security team does," he said. His voice was level, completely different from the barn from an hour ago. "Every shadow, every line of approach, I can help." Draven looked at him for a moment, really looked at him. "Anya. Get him a radio and a protective vest. He goes with the team in an advisory capacity." He met Leo's eyes. "You direct. You do not engage directly under any circumstances. If I hear otherwise, the internship conversation ends before it begins." Leo nodded, already moving. Ellie started forward. "Your father needs you here," Draven said, quietly, not as a command. "I'll make sure you see everything in real time. You have my word." The next hour was the longest of Ellie's life. She sat beside her father, his hand in both of hers, watching his color slowly return as Dr. Kang's adjustments took effect. The monitor beeped. The city hummed 40 floors below. On a security feed mounted to the wall, she watched the teams approach, familiar roads, familiar shadows, the old dirt lane in night vision green. Leo's vest camera showed the farm the way she knew it in her bones. The barn, the chicken coop, the old oak by the fence line. She saw the three figures before the security team did. Tree line, moving low and careful toward the house. Leo's hand came up, a flat, slow gesture. Stop, he team held. He moved wide, quiet, using the angle of the barn the way he'd used it 100 times playing hide-and-seek as a kid. He knew exactly where the ground was soft, where it was firm, where the light fell and where it didn't. He reached the first figure before the figure knew he was there. It was over in seconds. All three individuals were secured, no one harmed, no property touched. Leo stood up, looked directly into his vest camera, and gave a small, lopsided grin. He mouthed two words, "I'm okay." Ellie put her face in her hands and breathed. Anya came in quietly a few minutes later, a folder in her hand. "They're talking," she said. "They work for Langford's private security division. They were sent to locate any original documentation from Matilda Thornwood, journals, notes, anything handwritten. If they found nothing," she stopped. "What?" Ellie asked. "They were instructed to leave, and to make sure the property couldn't be used as a base of further research." Anya's voice was carefully neutral. "They didn't know the family had already left. They believed there was someone home." The implications settled over Ellie slowly, and then all at once. They had nearly lost Leo, not because of anything her family had done, not because of any choice they'd made, because of a legacy they'd inherited from a woman they'd never met, and because a frightened, greedy man had decided that was a threat worth eliminating. She sat down. Her legs had made the decision without consulting her. Draven came in from the hallway, moving carefully in the wheelchair, his face tight. "Victor Langford is holding a press conference tomorrow morning," he said. "He's planning to announce a breakthrough HSE treatment and claim full credit for its development. He's been attempting to reconstruct Matilda's original methodology for decades. He had fragments, stolen from early records, but he couldn't complete the synthesis because he didn't understand the traditional healing framework. He believed your family had the missing components. That's why he wanted me stopped. That's why he sent people to your farm." "How certain are you of this?" Ellie asked. "The individuals detained in this building tonight were cooperative. They provided documentation, internal communications, financial records, clinical files." Draven's voice was quiet and deliberate. "Among those files were records of unauthorized medical trials run by Langford's company over the past 30 years. 17 people died in those trials. The trials were covered up." He paused. "One of those individuals was a woman in Carteret County, North Carolina, enrolled without her family's full informed understanding of the risks." He looked at Ellie. "I'm deeply sorry." The room was absolutely silent. Ellie heard the monitor beeping. She heard her own breathing, the strange illness, the years of watching her mother struggle while doctors offered explanations that never quite fit. The slow, devastating progression of something no one seemed to be able to name correctly. It hadn't been random. "She was in those trials," Ellie said. Her voice came out very quietly. "We believe so. The FBI will confirm it as part of the investigation. What I can tell you with certainty is that Langford will face the full legal consequences of what he did. The documentation is complete. The FBI is coordinating a response tonight." He held her gaze. "And the treatment, the real one, the completed one, will be released publicly and at no cost. No patents, no profit, just access. For everyone." The morning news moved faster than Ellie had ever seen news move. Victor Langford was taken into custody at his company headquarters before his press conference could begin. The footage, brief, quiet, the particular dignity-removing quality of handcuffs in a lobby, played on every channel. The charges were extensive: fraud, criminal negligence, unauthorized medical experimentation, obstruction. Details that came out over the following hours were worse than anything Draven had summarized the night before. Blackwood Biotech released a public statement by mid-morning. The HSE treatment would be made available immediately, at no cost, to patients and healthcare systems in low-income communities worldwide. 12 community health clinics would be established across the rural South, beginning with a facility in Beaufort, North Carolina. It would bear the name Matilda Thornwood Community Health Center. Ellie read that line 3 times. Her father was sitting up beside her by then, his color restored, Dr. Kang satisfied enough to allow him coffee. Leo was on a video call from UNC. He'd apparently already enrolled, apparently already found his dorm room, apparently already acquired a lab coat he was wearing while showing them his desk. Dr. Kang was in the other room laughing at something Anya had said, the sound of it unexpected and warm. Draven came in from the corridor carrying something carefully in both hands, a book. Old, worn, the cover dark with age, the pages visible at the edges a deep cream yellow. Ellie's breath stopped. She knew that book, not from memory, from a photograph. Her great-grandmother's portrait in the hallway of the farmhouse, Matilda sitting at a table, one hand resting on a book exactly this size, this shape. "We found it," Draven said. He crossed the room and held it out to her. "The Beaufort Church Archives." Matilda's sister Clara made a full transcription of the journals after the fire. She didn't trust that the originals would survive, so she copied everything by hand and sealed it in the church's records room. It's been there for over a century. He watched her face. "My research team located it last week. I wanted to be the one to give it to you." Ellie took the book. Her hands were not entirely steady. She opened it slowly. The handwriting inside was neat and careful. Notes on plants, on preparation, on patience, on observations made over decades of practice in a small coastal community that had never made it into any formal medical text. Tucked between two pages was a photograph, small and slightly faded. A woman with sure hands and calm eyes. The same jaw. The same stubborn, certain set to it. Ellie's jaw. "I didn't give you this to create an obligation," Draven said softly. "I gave it to you because it belongs to you. It always did, not to me, not to Langford, not to any institution or corporation, to your family." She looked up at him. "Why did you go to this much trouble?" she asked. The question was genuine. "For people you didn't know 3 weeks ago." He was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly rather than deflecting it. "Because you gave me something first," he said. "Without any knowledge of who I was or what it might cost you, you stayed. You talked to me, you told me I was safe." A pause. "I've built a great deal in my life. I've been in rooms with extraordinarily powerful people. I don't think any of them have ever said something that simple to me and meant it that completely." He looked at her steadily. "You saw a person, not a name, not an asset, not a problem to solve or an opportunity to evaluate, just a person who needed help." He let that sit. "That's rare. It deserves something better than a thank you." He reached into his jacket and produced a small, folded piece of paper. He held it out. It was a copy of her UNC acceptance letter. Preserved and framed, the edges of the frame carved with the helix motif of his company, careful work. "Not rushed. I know you put this away," he said. "I know why. I'm not here to tell you that was the wrong choice, because it wasn't. It was the choice of someone who loves their family more than their own ambitions, and that's not a small thing." He set the frame gently on the table beside her. "But you don't have to choose between them anymore. The clinic in Beaufort will need a director. You can work with Dr. Kang on the research side. You can finish your degree at whatever pace works for your life. No pressure. No strings. Just an option that was always yours, waiting." Ellie stood with the framed letter in her hands and felt something move in her chest that she hadn't felt in 4 years. Not joy exactly. Something quieter than joy. The particular feeling of a door you'd believed was permanently closed, swinging open just slightly, enough to let light through. She looked at her father. He was watching her with bright eyes, and she recognized the expression exactly. She'd seen it in old photographs. Her father as a young man, before the weight of years and illness and loss, the open-faced look of a person who still believed that good things were possible. She looked at the book in her hands, at Matilda's handwriting. She thought about the past 3 weeks, the chaos and fear, yes, but also the other things. Draven on a video call at midnight trying to talk a farmhand through repairing a piece of equipment he'd never seen in person. Consulting diagrams on his phone with the focused seriousness he apparently brought to everything. Long evenings at the table going through the copied pages of the journal together. Draven asking questions about her grandmother's methods with genuine curiosity. No condescension, no corporate framing. The afternoon he'd sat with her father for 3 hours just listening to stories about Elia's mother, about the old ways, about the land, and hadn't looked at his phone once. She looked at him now. She stepped forward and closed the space between them, and she kissed him. It was quiet, unhurried, tasting of salt air from the window they'd left open and the sweet tea he'd been drinking all afternoon. No grand gesture, just something honest, offered and returned. When she stepped back, he was smiling in a way she hadn't seen from him before, unguarded, a little surprised by himself. Okay, she said softly. Her forehead rested against his. I'm in, as a partner, as whatever this turns out to be. His laugh was low and warm. His hand came up to her face. Good, because I've been wanting to say that since the moment you told me off for almost dying on your beach. From the kitchen doorway, without turning around, Leo said, I'm going to go check on Brutus. Ellie laughed so hard her shoulders shook. I went to the beach that evening, the same stretch of Outer Banks where the storm had deposited Draven 3 weeks before. The sun was going down over the Atlantic, painting everything in shades of copper and rose, unhurried, generous light. The waves came in soft and even, nothing like the night that had started all of this. Draven rolled his wheelchair to the tide line. The wheels sank slightly in the wet sand. Ellie walked beside him, the journal tucked under her arm, the evening air smelling exactly like home. I was on that transport because I was coming here, he said, looking out at the water. I'd been tracing Matilda's trail for years. I had fragments, references, second-hand accounts. I thought if I could find her original documentation, I could complete what my research team had been building. I didn't expect to find a family that had been living the legacy all along, who didn't need anyone to tell them their knowledge was valuable because they'd always known it was. He turned to her. The sunset light softened everything. I'm not asking for anything specific, he said. Not a relationship, not a commitment, not anything you're not ready for or don't want. What I am telling you is that whatever shape your life takes from here, I want to be useful to it. As a partner, as a friend, as someone in your corner. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out the framed letter again. She'd left it on the table upstairs. You earned this 4 years ago, he said. It was always yours. She took it, looked at her own name on the letterhead, looked at the ocean, thought of her mother, of Matilda, of her father's hands on a stranger's chest in the middle of a storm, remembering something his mother had taught him decades before. Thought of herself, 19 years old, folding a letter and putting it in a drawer and saying later, while meaning something else entirely. She wasn't going to do that anymore. 6 months later, the Matilda Thornwood Community Health Center in Beaufort opened on a Tuesday morning in early spring. It was modest and exactly right, painted the warm yellow of old farmhouses, with a garden out front full of the herbs and plants that Matilda had documented in her journals, labeled in both scientific and traditional names. Inside, it was clean and bright and purposeful, the kind of space that told people they mattered without having to say it out loud. Elias ran the traditional healing program. He taught twice a week local families, young people, anyone who wanted to understand the relationship between the land they lived on and the health of the people who lived there. His own heart condition was being managed with the new treatment, adjusted by Dr. Kang to incorporate compounds from Matilda's original formulations. His laugh had come back fully. She heard it through the clinic windows sometimes, rolling out into the garden, and it still made her stop what she was doing just to listen. Leo was in his 2nd semester at UNC, maintaining grades that were making his professors notice him in the good way. He came home most weekends, dropped his bag inside the door, changed out of his school clothes, and went directly to the barn. He and Brutus had an ongoing dispute about the new harness that showed no signs of resolution. He was interning in Raleigh in the spring and had already asked Dr. Kang 3 questions the doctor had called genuinely interesting. The farm was thriving. The manager Ellie had hired, a woman she'd known from the farmer's market for years, practical and warm and completely unbothered by billionaires, had expanded the vegetable program, added 2 more plots, and had a waiting list for the weekly stand. Ellie divided her time between Beaufort and Miami. She ran the traditional and community health initiative at Blackwood Biotech, working with Dr. Kang to validate and integrate Matilda's herbal methodologies into the broader HSE treatment protocol, making the treatment more accessible and less expensive for rural communities. She was finishing her pre-med degree online, on track to complete it the following spring. She'd started telling people she was going to be a doctor again. It didn't feel like a lie anymore. Draven had changed his schedule. He still ran Blackwood Biotech. That hadn't changed. But the 70 and 80-hour weeks had given way to something more sustainable, and Beaufort had become a regular feature of his calendar. He'd learned which fence posts on the Thornwood property were structurally questionable. He'd learned that Brutus did not respect professional attire. He'd learned to make sweet tea that was genuinely good rather than technically correct, a milestone Elias had marked with ceremony. He and Ellie were something real and growing without a rush to name it, built on shared purpose, honest conversation, the kind of trust that gets made slowly and holds better for it. He'd met her mother's family. He'd sat with them for hours, listening. When they gave him a photograph of her mother to keep, he'd thank them quietly and put it on his desk where he could see it. Victor Langford was in prison. Omni Pharma had been dissolved, its remaining assets redirected to fund HSE treatment access for low-income patients globally. The press coverage had been extensive. The accountability had been real. The 17 families whose loved ones had died in unauthorized trials had received acknowledgement, and the legal process was ongoing. The cure was out in the world, doing exactly what it was always supposed to do. One evening, the two of them sat on the porch of the Thornwood farmhouse in the last of the daylight. Inside, Leo was loudly disputing something with a video game that had wronged him. From the garden, the soft sounds of Elias moving between his plants, talking to them the way he always had, the way his mother had taught him. Draven handed Ellie a glass of iced tea. She took a sip. Perfect. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the sky going pink and gold over the water. I spent a long time believing that the most important thing I could do was build something large enough to solve large problems, he said. That if I made enough, earned enough, built enough, I could erase every loss, fix every broken thing. He turned the glass in his hand. I was missing the point entirely. What's the point? She asked. He found her hand on the arm of the chair and laced his fingers through hers. The people who show up, he said. The ones who run toward the hard thing instead of away from it, who give without knowing what it costs them, who hold someone's hand in the dark and just keep talking, even when they don't know if anyone can hear. He looked at her. I thought I was the one who needed saving that night, and I was, but that's not the whole story. She didn't say anything. The waves rolled in, soft and steady, the same ocean that had carried him here. Inside, Leo's dispute with the video game had apparently resolved in his favor. Elias laughed at something rich and full and real, the laugh that had been missing for years and had found its way back. Ellie leaned her head against Draven's shoulder. She thought of Matilda, writing in her careful hand in a journal that had waited a century to be found. She thought of her mother, and the strange comfort of knowing now that her illness had a name and that the name had been known and that knowledge was finally doing what it was always supposed to do, healing people. She thought of a stormy night, a flashlight nearly torn from her hand, a shape in the seaweed that turned out to be a person. She thought of her grandmother's voice. The breath is the first song. If the song stops, you must make it start again. The song hadn't stopped. It had just found a new voice. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, then do something simple. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you're here for the next one. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that good things still happen to good people. And leave a comment. Tell me your favorite moment. Was it Ellie laying down her terms in that penthouse? Leo on the farm proving everyone wrong? The quiet kiss on the beach? The journal? A century of knowledge finally coming home? I want to read every single one. More stories about legacy, love, and the extraordinary things that ordinary people carry. They're coming. You're in exactly the right place. The lesson this story carries: real wealth isn't measured in what you've accumulated. It's measured in who you show up for, the courage you find when it costs you something, and the willingness to honor what came before you. The most lasting things aren't built on power or fear. They're built on kindness given freely, community held close, and the quiet, unshakable belief, passed down through hands and voices and worn old journals, that every single life is worth fighting for.